cosmos and chaos, two gods who rule over all creation. The space betwixt them is the rhythm. From here was born the music crystal, which fills the world with harmony. Yet the chaotic forces in the universe wax stronger, disrupting this harmony and dimming the light of the crystal. The only thing which can now restore the radiance of the crystal is the musical wavelength filling all space.
Welcome back to Final Fantasy the Psychology and Philosophy. In this episode I'm going to be talking about the music of the series, which admittedly I've really been looking forward to doing, so hopefully you can tolerate my present intensity. If you've spent any time browsing my YouTube channel, you can probably tell that I really love the music of Final Fantasy, especially where Uematsu is concerned. Nothing would bring me more pleasure than to share my thoughts about this.
Let's start by talking about the composers. There have been several composers involved with the Final Fantasy soundtracks, including Kumi Tanioka, Masaru Hamauzu, Junya Nakano, Naoshi Mizuta, Masaharu Iwata, and Hitoshi Sakitmoto. The most notorious Final Fantasy composer is Uematsu. Additionally, Yoko Shimomura has recently been assigned to work on the FF15 soundtrack. These musicians have created some outstanding music, some of which is in my personal opinion as masterfully imagined as the works of Tchaikovsky, Verdi, or John Sebastian Bach. I must say, however, that this is rather difficult to tell for sure, since it is nearly impossible to measure creativity, or to assign it a value, or to declare the tangible quality of music or any other art form for that matter. Composers have produced tracks encompassing many styles, feelings, and aesthetics, ranging from tracks such as the lonely Dark World from Final Fantasy VI to the lively Costa del Sol from Final Fantasy VII.
It would be simpler to show than tell, so let's listen to a few clips from the Final Fantasy series. As with the score of a movie, the primary function of a video game soundtrack is to set the mood.
To demonstrate this point, Let's look at a couple of movie clips.
Hurry up now, Tyler. Hurry up, he's coming straight for us. Don't screw it up now. Don't wait for me. Come on, Hooper, come on, hurry up, tie it on. Now. Kill it, Quince. Kill it. Now. Shoot. Hurry it up now, tie it on. Hurry it up, he's coming straight for us. Don't screw it up now. Don't wait for me. Come on, Hooper, come on, hurry up, tie it on. Kill it, Quince. Kill it. Now. Shoot. Hooper, hurry it up now, tie it on. Hurry up, he's coming straight for us. Don't screw it up now. Don't wait for me. Come on, Hooper, come on, hurry up, tie it on. Kill it, Quince. Kill it. Now. Shoot. Hurry. What are you doing? You know I'm getting a clean shot right in the head. All right, let's see how long that bound takes to bring him up. See you go! I'm coming around again!
In the Final Fantasy series, I've noticed about 20 or so mood-setting song templates and archetypes, about 12 different kinds of character themes, 2 or 3 kinds of world map themes, 2 kinds of friendly town themes, various kinds of unfriendly town themes, themes for exploring beautiful natural wonders, themes for individual villains, themes for villainous groups or organizations, themes for weird and silly events, and many, many more.
There are a lot of different templates, but considering that each soundtrack contains between 40 and 70 individual tracks, there has been ample wiggle room for patterns to develop. Let me show you a few of these musical archetypes I'm talking about, such as exploring a natural wonder.
This is what I like to call oppressive jazz. Airship themes always sound open, free, and optimistic.
Personally, I'm amazed by the sheer variety of melody and aesthetic present in Final Fantasy.
But, despite the many genres, There is a feeling of consistency running throughout the soundtracks of the entire series. Let me show you some examples of what I'm talking about.
I'm going to play a sample of 3 of Uematsu's many musical archetypes. The 3 songs I sampled are distinctly different from one another, but in my observation there's a notable similarity between them.
Uematsu routinely composed tracks that followed a particular pattern, one which many other composers have emulated since.
But we'll get to that shortly.
The music of Final Fantasy tends to start off with a particular feeling, vibe, or aesthetic. This could be an atmospheric, mysterious vibe, such as the Evil Forest clip I played, or a rhythmic repetition like Magitech Factory, or even a soft, peaceful vibe, such as the song that is playing right now. But 9 times out of 10, the music, regardless of its genre, flavor, or theme, will bridge and crescendo into a climactic segment, often utilizing a sudden change in chords, time signature, or instrument swatch, which is what I like to call the emotional release. This sudden swell of feeling usually lasts about 10 to 20 seconds before transitioning back into the original tone of the track, or looping back to the beginning.
There are 3 main reasons for this.
First and foremost, the tracks, particularly in the older games, needed to seamlessly loop over and over again, so the music had to sound consistent. The second reason is connected to the first reason. The soundtracks had to be interesting, The swells of emotional disturbance serve to make the individual track suddenly uplifting, or adversely, unexpectedly suspenseful, which would help to refresh the gamer's mood cycles and increase his immersion. This could be compared with a burst of warm, contrasting color on an otherwise monochromatic blue painting, or a garnish on a meal. An example of this sudden shift in mood can be heard in Final Fantasy VII's Honeybee Manor, a song which starts out sounding playful and silly, but then takes on an unexpectedly sinister turn before looping back to the beginning. Honeybee Manor appears at first glance to be comical fun and quirky. However, it seemed to me that its facade belied its true nature. Although I would generally expect any Central Slums brothel for businessmen to be a seedy place, it was, with the aid of the music, that I understood what the place was to begin with.
That and the, rooms. That brings me to the third major reason for the music, the storytelling.
I would go as far as to say that roughly 50% of the storytelling in a series like Final Fantasy is done through its soundtracks.
Dreaming of the stars on high that speak to me in secret sighs, drifting on a breeze, only I can feel and hear.
When your hero walks around in towns and dungeons, travels across a vast desert or a boundless ocean, some of us occasionally wonder, what is he thinking? How are they feeling? I wonder if they're frightened, if they're still angry with so-and-so, etc. The dynamic twists and turns of the climax of many of Uematsu's otherwise thematically homogeneous game compositions remind us of the story, of the struggle, of the wrath of the monsters around every corner, of the determination and valor of the protagonists.
Beyond the sky, come out, don't hesitate, don't look back, we've got to go now, don't fear, you'll be safe from now on, morning star watching all around. Deep inside, so silently, my heart was beat. Deep inside of me, memories.
We remember the reason they are having these adventures to begin with, and we feel their ups and downs alongside of them in between bouts of hiking and chocobo riding.
The general aesthetic and emotional palette of Uematsu's music in most of the games, I would say, is very bittersweet. It creates an atmosphere that is simultaneously challenging, tantalizing, foreboding, and hopeful.
It's no wonder, considering the very strange ethereal landscapes we progress through as we play the series. Naturally, some area music sounds tense, but it rarely does so in a way that is intended to make the player feel powerless or hopeless. From listening to the battle music, typically the most tense songs of all, we can hear that the developers wanted the battles to seem fun, for the posse to appear powerful and capable, and for the gamers to feel rewarded for their efforts. There is even separate reward music at the end of the battles to congratulate us on our achievements. Uematsu started this trend, but the other composers each took it and ran with it, interjecting their own unique essences into the ever-evolving compound and elaborating upon his formulas. By doing this, the second main composer to come onto the Final Fantasy scene helped to pioneer the branch aesthetic of Ivalice, while simultaneously elaborating on the aesthetic of the previous games. With the help of Iwata, the other composer on the project, Sakitmoto would later expand upon this slightly more Star Wars-like variation of the original aesthetic in Final Fantasy XII. But Uematsu, and the creator of the series for that matter, were doubtlessly no less influenced by John Williams, the other Star Wars composers, and everything else Star Wars. Other notable influences include the works of famous classical composers such as Strauss and Verdi. There are also a lot of classic rock and pop music influences. Uematsu himself said that he became a composer because he wanted to be like Elton John. We've examined Uematsu's touch as well as Sakimoto's touch. There are some other composers worth mentioning who had a significant impact on the atmospheres in Final Fantasy X, Crystal Chronicles 13 and 11. Hamauzu's touch is particularly relevant since, like Uematsu and Sakimoto, he had a soundtrack project all to himself, from whence spawned the memorable Blinded by Light and Saber's Edge battle themes, along with many other highly praised melodies. The specifics of what make Hamauzu's style unique are varied, but I have noticed a propensity on his part for using a lot of staccato. In addition to this, Tanioka's touch is prevalent in Final Fantasy XI, with tracks such as Mockmail. Her Crystal Chronicles debut in the series featured an enchanting, in-depth soundtrack, which made full use of a wide variety of medieval and world instruments. This significantly aided in facilitating a feeling of culture, travel, and community.
I was delighted when I realized that Tanioka's music was back in Final Fantasy XI.
As a series, Final Fantasy, much like Legend of Zelda and Dragon Quest, is very much about legacy. The soundtracks in each of these games, and many more, have contributed generously to the legacy, utilizing reoccurring and remixed melodies, such as the Chocobo themes, the Prelude, and the Moogle theme. The developers have further amplified the impact of nostalgia.
But the aforementioned track archetypes are part of the nostalgia also.
This extends to the character themes as well as the dungeon, level, world map, and vehicle themes. Along with the generic story-building tracks, there are several themes for individual characters in the series. To varied extents, there are connections between the character archetypes I talked about in Part 5 and their theme songs. The themes for the youthful support characters, for example, are virtually always plucky, cheerful, yet tender. The themes for valiant protectors tend to feel severe, militant, and grounded. The themes for the noble rose archetype seem to be passionate, melodramatic, and graceful. The themes for the magical princess characters are wistful and dreamy. I would say that one of the strongest feelings I get from the music of the series as a whole is that it is wistful yet hopeful. This is partly due to the structure of the emotional release I described earlier, and partly due to Uematsu's fascination with minor chords.
On that note, he is either very fond of making sad tracks or just very skilled at it.
Someone else who worked alongside Uematsu is especially gifted at writing highly emotional video game themes. Yasunori Mitsuda, who is best known for his work on the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. Uematsu is often credited first for this soundtrack, as he also contributed to the project, but the vast majority of it was composed by Mitsuda. His work in Chrono Trigger is very similar structurally to the Final Fantasy soundtracks. His songs follow the same pattern for the most part, maintaining a constant aesthetic, followed by a splash of contrast. This is also true of the Chrono Cross soundtrack, which, just for a bit of trivia, is actually my favorite game soundtrack, although Mitsuda's unique style is more prominent in these songs, as they are in his Xenogears and Xenosaga soundtracks, focusing slightly more on atmosphere and slightly less on storytelling. That being said, his range of style is as vast as Uematsu's.
Let's talk about video game soundtracks in general. It is my favorite topic.
Donkey Kong Country. This is a perfect example of an atmospheric or aesthetic-building soundtrack. Each level track maintains a consistent, highly themed flavor, which, although expressing the mood of the setting, mainly draws the player's focus to the environment in which the gameplay takes place. The same is generally true of the other Rareware platformers, some of which are using the same composers. This is very appropriate and somewhat necessary for a platformer-type game, whereas the soundtrack of an RPG like Final Fantasy is often trying to stimulate the player's imagination directly, enticing them to explore the characters as well as the environments. A good crossover would be the Castlevania soundtracks. Castlevania is a platformer like Donkey Kong, but it also contains some RPG elements, and has more of a backstory than many platformer-type games. How very Konami of them. The music in Castlevania often creates an atmosphere of acute emotional tension, which I have found serves to make the player vigilant, absorbed into the rhythms of the gameplay and the mood of the nightmarish environments, as though in a trance. Jeremy Soule, a well-loved composer, has a completely different style. Although his soundtracks have evolved over the past decades, he's invented a genre of game music all to himself, often mimicked in MMORPGs. His style lends well to MMOs in general, which usually call for non-invasive, unobtrusive music, since the players often spend several, sometimes countless hours in the same locations. In the Elder Scrolls series, his atmospheric pieces are not designed to loop, and are far less formulaic. This kind of music is especially appropriate for sandbox RPGs, where the scope of variables is far too great to accommodate a static, repetitive soundtrack. Instead, Jeremy Soule's tracks are very intentionally emotionally neutral, coming across as, albeit beautiful, but highly generalized fantasy music. Then there are games like Mario and Kirby, filled with fun, catchy tunes, meant to entertain the player. Final Fantasy does this to some extent as well, utilizing pleasant, light melodies and catchy rhythms, although these usually occur during downtime. Somewhere between Mario and Final Fantasy is Legend of Zelda. Star Fox can also be found here. Koji Kondo, considered by many to be the ultimate video game composer, sometimes working alongside other composers, created some exceptionally diverse soundtracks. To a degree, this is also the case for the Final Fantasy scores. Although it appears that the vast majority of it is meant to be story-building music, the application and placement of the music in the series is, in my opinion, most comparable to the Legend of Zelda and Chrono series.
This might have a lot to do with the fact that these are my favorite 3 series.
I have to admit, there is just something that is so fascinating and satisfying about this. personally loved how they took out the battle and victory music in Final Fantasy XII, playing the struggle music only during boss fights, and following it up with the classic fanfare. It certainly made some of us feel like we'd accomplished something.
And yet the old school formula was equally satisfying.
I guess what makes a soundtrack good is not just the melodies, but the application of the melodies.
I hope you've enjoyed this little lecture of mine. I've enjoyed it. The next episode is going to go into the very bowels of Final Fantasy, delving deep into psychology and philosophy. I'm going to be talking about the Underworld, the Void, the Netherworld, and the Tree of Life.